Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasting.
Witchcraft, the occult, extremist beliefs, murder. Tune in to Rogue Darkness each Friday and join host Raven as I uncover horrific crimes committed under the misconceptions and misunderstandings of witchcraft and other belief systems. I'll cover a wide range of crimes involving ritualistic killings and extremist beliefs to cult persuasion and supposed possession. Anything and everything that borders the line of horrifying. There's always three sides to a story. Side A, Side B, and then the truth. Let's uncover the truth together and explore the darkness of mankind, one crime at a time. Available wherever you get your podcast fix, simply by searching Rogue Darkness.
Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way.
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
We say fuck a lot. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
What's up, Dylan?
I'm a big old goblin Dylan.
Gobble, gobble, motherfucker. What's up?
It's almost turkey day, y'all.
I'm not in the mood for any of your turkey.
Even with some gravy on it?
I'm not a big turkey fan. I mean, it's okay, but I don't really seek it out.
We were discussing this just the other day as we made our tentative Thanksgiving plans, if you will. We like the sides. I'm into the sides. I
could just have a Thanksgiving filled with sides.
Yes.
All the veggie dishes.
Oh my gosh.
Desserts.
The casseroles.
Yeah.
And the pecan pies.
How many casseroles can one eat on Thanksgiving? Because there's so many. I can think of, you got sweet potato casserole, green bean, squash, broccoli. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Oh, you should make a casserole that is all those casseroles in one.
Oh, man. So you could get a big pan and then split it into 4 parts?
No, I'm mixed all together.
No, I'm thinking then just bake it together and then see how it interacts.
Oh, yeah, around the edges?
Yeah, like a Neapolitan Thanksgiving dish.
Yeah, you never know quite what you're going to get.
I don't know about all that.
That with a spoonful of love.
A spoon, yeah. That's what I'm into is the big spoonful of love.
No, but people go crazy for the old turkeys, and I like turkey with a little gravy on it, but I could take or leave it. But, hey, I'm here for the ham, and if you love turkey, that's fine. I'll accept that. And I know that I'm going to eat too much and eat too many different things. I'm a sampler. You know what I mean? I like to get a little bit of everything, and I think that's where I go wrong.
I'm going to have a nap. I know that.
Yes. So we hope everybody has a great, great Thanksgiving. But right now, we're here for part 2 of this crazy story we started last week.
The Sexton Family.
And it's going to be a downer, folks.
Man, I got to tell you, when we finished recording last week, I had to rinse my soul.
Yeah.
I had to soak it in some bleach.
The sage wasn't strong enough.
Felt dirty afterwards.
It was rough.
Look, part 2 is no exception. It is as disturbing as part 1. So again, trigger warning. If a super fucked up story is not your thing, you might want to check out.
I like that very professional description.
Well, we say fuck a lot. We tell people in the beginning, but I don't know what you want from me.
It's an apt description, and let's get into it.
All right. So May's brother, Tuck Carson, had not laid eyes on his sister in years until she had shown up at their mother's funeral in 1991. Tuck considered May and her husband to be oddballs. So when May and Ed showed up saying they wanted to visit for a few days, Tuck and his wife Colleen thought something was going on. Ed told Tuck that welfare officials were accusing him of incest. Can you believe that? That I'd do something like that to my own children, he asked. Tuck answered, no, not really. It would take a sick son of a bitch to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's almost every single person's reaction to something like that, you know?
So meanwhile, back in Ohio, Michelle had painted a good family portrait for authorities. Ed Sexton, the patriarch, ruled his household with an iron fist. Stability, however, was not achieved. Interpersonal relationships among the family was capricious. Loyalties changed day by day, hour to hour, minute to minute. Everyone wanted Ed's favor and attention. Their father's adoration was the prime motivation for tattling on each other. May Sexton seemed to be in direct competition with her daughters. Michelle said May lied often, especially on the older girls, in order to get Ed's approval.
That's very weird. You're supposed to protect. I don't understand parents that in any way compete with their children. You know what I mean?
It's very weird.
How they feel like are jealous of their kids or don't want their kids to just, succeed and be functioning adults.
Look, I grew up in this household, not this particular household, but with a parent that was jealous, did not want me to succeed, seemed like was in some sort of strange competition with me.
Right.
And it's very fucked up and weird. I mean, even as a child, you're looking at your parent like, what are you doing?
Right.
Can't you just be happy that I'm doing something well? Do you have to compare, well, I did it this way, or, I mean, it's just very strange.
Or I couldn't do that because I had you, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, whatever, dude. Nobody asked for you to spit me out.
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of know firsthand, like, just how it makes you feel to have a parent that seems to resent you and always trying to compete with you, even over minor things. I mean, it's very weird. Ed also played mind games with the children, telling them individually, like in secret, Dylan, quote, I love you the most. You are the one.
That's so manipulative and just abusive, emotionally abusive.
Well, then he would remind them that it was a secret because their siblings would get jealous. So it was sort of like creating this fake bond with that child. Willie, the oldest boy, was very restricted while Charles was allowed to play sports and leave the house freely. Willie was called Little Dick by his father. Because remember, Ed measured all the boys' penises?
Oh, God.
And then let everyone in the family know. Very strange. He was downgraded, called a wimp, and Ed would slap him around. Yet Willie would do anything asked of him. Christopher was mother's favorite, as we mentioned in part 1, and allowed to play football at school. Kimberly was coddled and got less whoopings. Matthew was considered like the master of stealth mode. He was able to fly under the radar, shielding himself from any kind of attention, good or bad. He just kind of hid out. Lana was the Futuretron, so she was given lots of attention.
Oh, yeah, because the aliens are
favored because, yes,
right.
She had special palm powers.
I didn't even look at my palms that closely after the last episode. I might be a Futuretron.
The power of the palm.
Yeah.
Compels you.
What does a palm say to the face?
Slap.
Slap, bitch.
Ed would have her practice posing for cameras and rehearsing for public appearances. Like doing the wave and walking like she's on a red carpet, because once they have this deal with Burger King and Wendy's, she's going to be on every magazine cover.
Well, yeah, and that's a really sound business plan. That I still do not understand.
James was always the butt of jokes from the whole family because he was on the spectrum and everyone called him slow and made fun of him, which is cruel and horrible. Sherry alternated from being the favorite child to being in the, quote, doghouse, usually because she didn't want to slow dance with her father at the weekend living room dance parties.
Oh, my God. So gross.
Pixie, the eldest, of course, was a favorite and her father's sexual partner. She assumed a mother role to the siblings, barking orders, and had a direct line to Ed. She reported the siblings every minor discretion, to their father, every little indiscretion.
So, oh yeah, amongst the other children, they knew not to include Pixie
In anything.
any kind of talk of dissent or anything negative about Ed, because she's going to run tell.
Michelle described Pixie to authorities as seemingly in love with their father. Pixie enjoyed being with him, had no interest in other men, and only married Joel because he was so mellow and she could control him. According to Michelle, Pixie had cut Joel off sexually after they'd gotten married. Joel considered Michelle a friend, often confiding in her. Michelle didn't want to tell Joel the truth, that the reason Pixie didn't want to have sex with him was because she wanted to be with her father. Yeah.
That is so very messed up. And I feel for Pixie because she's a true victim.
Very twisted.
In this, and all twisted up with her feelings and the relationship with her father and the rest of her family. But it's very, very sad, but it's really messed up.
Michelle had heard from others that Ed had ordered Joel's beatings. She didn't know why that Joel was being beaten. Ed would order Joel around, telling him what to do, and often treated him like her brother Willie, like he was just the beck and call boy, like you do whatever I tell you to do kind of thing. And Joel was very eager to please, and so he would pretty much do anything Ed told him to do. Michelle told a story of how Ed killed her only pet, a rabbit. He made her watch as he killed the rabbit, then treated the bunny like a puppet, tormenting her with it.
Ooh.
Later, he served the rabbit at dinner and forced Michelle to eat her pet.
That's sadistic.
This guy is fucked, okay? The word of the day is fuck, and he is fucked. There's no other way to describe this man. He's a fucking demon.
Well, it's like you're hearing the story. We're into part 2 now, and you're like, wow, I don't think it can get more messed up, and it just keeps getting more messed up.
It's going to get more messed up, Dylan. Ed forced the family to participate, we talked about this in part 1, in these occult type rituals where he would wear a black robe and speak in tongues. He read Bible passages, but spun his own interpretations mixed with elements of the occult. Once Ed had taken Michelle to Canton, Ohio, to a cemetery, he forced her to climb into a newly dug grave. He told her this was to test her courage. Michelle was required to stay in this hole for 30 minutes while he placed a giant piece of cardboard on top of her that kind of covered
right, simulate
grave,
being buried, I guess.
while Ed made creepy noises nearby.
Oh my God.
While Michelle was living in these safe houses, and then she stayed briefly with Joel and Pixie, she met an older man named David Croto who owned a bookstore. Michelle would marry him in June of 1993. At the campground in Indiana, because remember they've gone to visit Tuck, the uncle, May's brother, and now they've rented this tiny 2-bedroom trailer at this campground. And I don't know if it's like a trailer or like a camper trailer.
Right.
It's not been fully I haven't been able to fully vet out.
It sounds like a 2-bedroom RV, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like a camper trailer. So they're living at this trailer with 11 or 14 people? I mean, it's a lot of people.
How does that many people even go in there and sit down, let alone live in the space like this?
Well, while they're at this campground in Indiana, the kids were given more freedom than before. We talked about this briefly in part 1. Charles would report that during this time, Ed was taking pain medication, pills of some kind, and that sometimes he would shoot up with a syringe, but Charles wasn't sure what exactly Ed was shooting up, what kind of drug it was. He would say it was pain medication.
Right.
The 2-bedroom trailer was crowded because Pixie's kids were always screaming and crying. So think about that. You got 3 little kids under the age of 5, a baby, a toddler, and 4-year-old. So they're always screaming and crying. Then you've got Ed and May arguing constantly and fighting constantly. It was a miserable situation for everyone. Joel continued caring for the children and was the one who fed and cleaned the new infant. And by all accounts, Joel was enamored with his infant son, Skipper. Ed was not particularly fond of the new baby. Ed would call the baby, quote, below average.
Jeez.
And would not hold him, refuse to hold the baby. Ed would get upset when Dawn and Shasta referred to Joel as dad.
So he's just mad because his baby's regular bread, not incest.
Yes. He don't like this baby because it don't belong to him, or he's not sure if it belongs to him.
Right.
Who would call a baby below average?
Fucking Ed, man.
You look at an infant and you're like, meh, below average. I mean, what the hell? I didn't know there was like a rating scale.
Yeah, 1 through 10. Well, how do you rate this baby? I give it a 2.
This baby is mid. Every 2 weeks, Ed would leave Indiana with Pixie and Willie, where they would pick up their paychecks or their disability checks, whatever you want to call them, from a P.O. box in Ohio. Now, during one of these trips, Pixie and Ed had sex in the back seat of the car while Willie was driving. I know. Try to keep your lunch down.
No, it's gross, man.
I'm glad I didn't eat really before we started to record because
so this whole time they're basically hiding
out,
living on the run, if you will.
Yes,
in a way.
The boys were getting into trouble in Indiana. For example, Charles broke into a house and stole some items like a computer, a fax machine, and an answering machine.
He's setting up an office.
He apparently is. Ed made him return the items, saying the family didn't need any more, quote, heat on them, that they were wanted by the FBI. Plus, I also find it kind of funny because I'm like, what an 80s, early 90s thing to do is like, I'm stealing a fax machine.
Right.
An answering machine.
Who did he need to fax? I mean, really, what documents did he need to send over the wire?
Look, you don't know his business. Okay. Joel was the odd man out. While the Sexton boys did military drills in the woods, Joel was just taking care of the children. If one of the teenagers teased Joel and he reacted, Ed would threaten him. Like one time, I think it was Charles was teasing Joel, and Joel finally kind of had enough and bucked up on him and was like, if you keep bothering me, like, I'm going to beat your ass. And then Ed threw him against the wall and was like, if you want to beat somebody's ass, you can beat my ass.
Beat my ass.
Yeah.
Jesus.
And Joel's not much older than these boys.
Right.
I mean, at this point, Charles is like 18. Joel's 23. And then here's Ed, like 100 years old.
So Ed would
really,
basically, any sign of not complying or being completely submissive, have the other boys beat Joel up, basically.
And Joel was not allowed to react or defend himself.
I feel bad for Joel, but he should get out of this situation.
I agree.
And we've talked about this before, not having proper accommodations, be it, bedrooms or living conditions for your children, or for little ones, that's wrong. It's on you as a parent. And I know it's hard sometimes to, have enough room or space, but that's on you to keep working and making things better, and that's so wrong to just be kind of just playing the system and not having a proper place. I mean, expecting, what did you say, 11 people?
I think it becomes 14 people, actually. Look, dude, there's so fucking many of these. There's 12 kids, and then you bring in other kids and a spouse and cousins and baby mama. I don't know, dude. There's a whole bunch. There's a shit fuck ton of these Sexton people. I don't know. Just
having them crammed in a 2-bedroom anything, I don't care if it was a house, is just totally ridiculous.
Well, and this is a very unpopular thing to say, but let's be honest, when it comes to these people, and I don't mean specifically the Sextons, but these people who do not have proper accommodations for their kids, like, look, there was a bit on TikTok where there's this family who have like 6 and they're living in like a 2-bed or a 1-bedroom, and like the kids are on the floor and don't even have beds.
Right.
Sleeping like on the kitchen floor next to like the cat's litter box. I mean, and of course people were freaking out. Social media was freaking out about this. And I'm like, there's a solution to this. Quit having kids. I know it's unpopular to say, but quit having kids if you can't afford them.
No.
In 2024, there's no reason for you to be getting pregnant every year if you don't want to.
If you're in a bad spot like that, and again, I know it can be hard, and it can be hard to change your circumstances. It can be hard to break out of cycles of poverty and things like that. But if you can't afford to pay for and raise your kids, the last thing you need to do is have another kid. I mean, seriously. And no, that's not, I mean, you get into all that with abortion, not abortion. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about your personal responsibility.
Well, but again, personal responsibility is rarely part of the conversation, and the world is full of excuses, and everybody wants to make an excuse and offer up some scenario. Well, maybe they had this and blah, 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 and it's like, okay, those stories are kind of few and far between. Like, let's talk about the reality of the situation.
Right.
Is that Ed and May did not need to have 12 kids, right? And if you're on the run for whatever you're doing, why are you bringing your adult daughter, her adult husband, and these 3 little kids along for the ride, adding to this already cramped situation?
Yeah.
Nobody really has a lot of money coming in. You can't afford to bring this family
of 5
caravan, this traveling caravan like you're the fucking, I don't know, the Partridge Family or something. Bitch, y'all can't even play instruments. What y'all doing?
Can you imagine the other people in the campground are like, what the,
It's just,
hell?
none of it makes sense, right? Because
Yeah.
the last thing I'm going to do is be towing around my adult kids and my grandkids, and nobody has a place to sleep.
Well, no. And as the parents of multiple small children, I would not want any part of that. I wouldn't want to have, their own space. It's just very strange, but I mean, we know what it is. It's conditioning, and no one in this situation realizes how abnormal the situation is.
And like, maybe Pixie needs to quit having babies.
And sex with her father.
Yeah.
So there'd be a good place to start.
Well, again, it's all about choices, Dylan. Now, when Ed would threaten Joel, he would melt into a little child. Then Ed would tell everyone they couldn't leave the house in the daytime because he didn't want the landlord to see how many people were living in this 2-bedroom.
So you can only go out at night.
Yes. But Joel would disobey this order, and he went out every day to take long walks. That's when Willie came up with the idea first, Dylan. Willie went to Ed and Charles one day stating, quote, "We should take out Joel because, he has a lot of problems."
Yeah,
he's got the problems. Yeah.
Joel's the problem of everybody's problem.
Well, Joel's disobeying. He's going for walks. He's not staying in the camper with like the 86 other people. Ed told Willie he was, quote, "crazy," dismissing the idea. Yet later, Ed and Pixie discussed this idea further. Pixie suggested they get a life insurance policy on Joel. They also discussed freak accidents, like how the brakes could go out on the car.
Or the piano can fall from the, being hoisted above Joel.
Do you think they have a piano in this 2-bedroom? They probably do.
Cartoonish ways to kill someone.
I get it.
But we was moving that anvil and it just got away from us.
Well, they're the kind of family that would bring the piano,
Yeah.
like the grandfather clock. Now, Charles said, quote, "Why don't you just take him back to Ohio? Just drop his ass off somewhere." I mean, he's as messed up as Charles is, he's kind of the voice of reason in some of these situations because he's like, why are y'all talking about killing him? Just take him back home.
Right.
Just take him to his family's house.
And just leave him there.
Like, you don't have to do this elaborate plan of dropping a piano out of, we don't have a 2-story house. What are you doing?
Or a piano.
Though,
No, dude, that was the best thing they could do for Joel and those small kids is go drop their ass off somewhere. I mean, that'd be the best thing for Joel and the kids. To get the hell away from this nest of shit, batshit crazy.
Though Ed and May were in Indiana, the other children in Ohio weren't safe. So even though they fled the state, they're still bothering these kids who are in foster care. Ed and Charles had shown up at Matthew's school trying to lure him in the car. I imagine they're driving along the fence like, hey kid.
It's me, your dad.
It's your dad. Get in the car.
Remember what good times we never had?
Yeah. There's free candy.
There ain't no candy, Daddy. You ain't got no candy in there. You ain't got nothing but the devil in there.
I got candy under my ball sack, kid.
Go find it.
Probably.
Yeah.
This is fucking weird. I mean, you got to make a lot of it because it's so disgusting.
So I take it that he didn't want any part of that.
He didn't seem to. Then someone vandalized the foster home where Lana Sexton was staying. Finally, the Department of Health and Human Services filed a motion seeking permanent custody of James, Christopher, Matthew, Lana, and Kimberly. If the department had permanent custody of these underage children, these minor children, they would be able to bypass confidentiality rules to put out missing posters for the children, like missing persons posters. But because the kids were not in the state's custody, and there are these confidentiality, with minors protecting their identity.
They can't actually.
The state couldn't really do anything.
So they can't actually mount a proper search for these children.
Right, their hands were tied. Without serving the Sextons, the agency was able to place a notice in the newspaper classifieds regarding the court proceedings. You can publish a notice. So they did that, and a hearing date was set for August 4th of 1993. Then, Matthew Sexton went missing from his foster home. It seemed that Ed was determined to pick the kids off kind of one by one. So they've been driving by the school, been trying to lure him in the car, and then finally they are able to get him.
Because what this 2-bedroom camper trailer needs is more people in it.
We need more people, yes.
Right, because God forbid my kids be off living a halfway normal life.
Back in Indiana, the family was restless. They were all cramped into this tiny trailer with only a small TV, and Ed would spend hours reading Bible verses aloud to the family. None of the children were in school. Their only relief was the occasional trip to town to pick up supplies. Ed came up with a method for quieting Pixie's children and Kimberly. She's one of the youngest daughters. He made a mixture of alcohol and cold medication, and he called it NyQuil. But he's mixing the liquors with, like, allergy pills.
That's
nighttime medicines.
You're not supposed to do that.
You're not?
No, he's not an apothecary. He needs to stop.
Routinely, Ed would dose the children before bed. Charles, Joel, Matthew, and Christopher began devising a plan to run away. Yet Joel refused to leave without Pixie, so the plans were scrapped. After 5 months, the landlord confronted Ed about the large number of people living in the small trailer. She explained that the septic tank just couldn't handle it. Ed said he understood and the family would move on. The trailer was left spotless, and Ed was given back his $300 deposit. And that's the other thing. The landlord was just so surprised to find 14 people and 3 little kids, 3 children living in this, and that it was just absolutely immaculate. Cleaned. As if no one was allowed to move around when they were in there or something.
Right. It's like it wasn't even lived in with all those people crammed in there.
Though the Sexton house had been auctioned off in February, Ed would not return to the house to sign the necessary paperwork to push the sale through. When the auctioneer returned to the house after the deal had fallen through with buyers, the house had been trashed. Garbage was everywhere. There were piles of feces in every room.
Where'd you get the feces from?
They just go around shitting in every corner, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, did you prep for this when you were going to go trash the house? Did you have like beans the night before so everybody could have a good poo? And then everybody had their quadrant, their poo quadrant.
That's what I find so interesting, Dylan, is that some of the reports, over the years, there were so many reports to family services about, these children and the living conditions. And the social workers would go out and they were living in squalor, and then other times they would go out and describe how the house was immaculate, spotless, organized.
It's very strange.
Yeah. So it's sort of weird how they can go from hey, we're going to go shit in the floor, but we're going to leave this 2-bedroom trailer immaculately cleaned,
right,
pristine, spotless. I just find that very odd.
No, it doesn't add up.
Dave Sexton and his wife Jean lived in New Hudson, Florida. Dave is Ed's younger brother. They owned a 3 mobile home compound. One of their sons lived in a trailer, and Sherry Sexton once had resided in the 3rd trailer with her child until she had moved out. So David retired from the Air Force, and his wife was an active volunteer in the Pentecostal church. In June, the Sexton family caravan arrived in Florida. They leave Indiana and they go to Uncle Dave's in Florida. Some of the kids stayed in the camper while Ed and others moved into Dave's empty trailer where their daughter Sherry had once lived. While in Florida, Ed decided he wanted to take this case to the federal government. He made a 3-hour video production using home video cameras that Ed wanted to send to President Clinton and Attorney General Janet Reno.
Okay. You know, he dreams big. You can say that for Ed.
It's true. He reaches for the stars.
He does.
In the video, Ed ranted about how his constitutional rights had been violated. He covered details, blaming the situation on his daughter Michelle, on his brother Otis. He railed against the Stark County DHS, especially Wayne Welsh, the social worker, and the other, quote, black caseworker who had been assigned to the family. He was very upset that a black lady was working his case because Ed is very racist, by the way.
Of course he is.
In case you would have not made that inference. Now, one by one, he had the children continue carrying this narrative, with each child denying any type of abuse. Some family members would later say that Ed wrote out their parts and that they had spent hours and days rehearsing before they recorded this video. Pixie then mailed the tapes in mid-August from Hudson, Florida, and a mailbox in Newport Richey, Florida. On September 20th, permanent custody of the minor children was awarded to the state of Ohio. One of the first acts was to file missing persons reports for Kimberly, Matthew, and Christopher Sexton. If law enforcement could get felony warrants for the abuse that Lana had described, then the FBI could get involved. Then they could get subpoenas for blood work and prove incest. So they're trying to build a federal case against Ed.
Literally.
Yeah. While in Florida, drugs and alcohol were added to the mix. The older kids started scoring pot, and Pixie and Joel were buying alcohol. When Ed went away every 2 weeks to pick up those checks in Ohio, the kids partied. Joel, who was already ridiculed by Ed, became the butt of pranks and abuse. He just sort of became the punching bag. The brothers would jump Joel and attack him. He would lie motionless, unable to fend off the Sexton boys. Then Pixie turned on Joel suddenly. She began telling everyone that Joel had sexually abused the two daughters, Dawn and Shasta. That's when talk of the deadly insurance plan started up again. In a deposition, Sherry Sexton would say she watched Pixie call up multiple insurance agents, getting quotes on life insurance policies for Joel. Willie and Pixie seemed to be spending a lot of time together, talking in secret as if they were planning something. Willie and Charles began dabbling in their own occult practices. Somewhere they found a cassette tape of satanic chants. Like, you just randomly find those laying around.
I didn't know there was such a thing.
Yeah, man. The last time I was at Burger King getting my Futuretron meal,
yeah,
I found a satanic tape just next to my french fries.
Now, would you be weirded out if that's the tape that comes in your Columbia House tapes?
Dude. I would be like, no. So they get the satanic chants cassette tape, and they would start drawing pentagrams everywhere. Like vandalizing property, spray painting graffiti, and then just drawing pentagrams in the dirt.
Okay.
Super cool. With the whole Sexton clan in tow, of course, money was tight. Ed would start pawning off personal items, including some of the guns that he'd brought along on the trip. At least half a dozen police reports were filed within the few weeks of the Sextons arriving in Florida, mostly noting suspicious behavior. Like Dave Sexton's neighbors kept calling up, making reports. The front gate was locked with a chain and padlock, which folks thought was strange. And the Sexton boys ran around the woods, like behind the neighbors' houses and such, all night long. They also buried spikes in the yard to ambush anyone who might come in.
So they booby-trapped the property?
They did. It was booby-trapped. I love that word, booby-trapped. I like to think my boobs are trapped. Now, when Ed tried renting a house nearby and learned that another tenant had instead secured the lease, the man, Robert Wilson, began complaining that someone was breaking the windows out of his vehicles. vandalizing the property. They stole the license plates from his car and van.
Ed gets mad at people for no reason, and the people are just caught unawares because they could never imagine that someone's this mad about me renting a property instead of them. You know what I mean? It's very strange. He has a lot of problems.
Though no one had a job, the family were always bringing in new tools and home improvement items back to this trailer. The neighbors would see them just bringing in loads of new stuff, knowing no one had a job. Very strange. The abuse against Joel escalated. With parents gone, all the siblings ignored the rules. They also added huffing gasoline to their party activities.
Oh, wow. That's really going to level everything out.
Yes. At one party, they made Joel eat a live goldfish. Another time, Joel was stripped naked, a funnel inserted into his rectum while they poured hot sauce in.
Oh, God.
Charles tried to force a broomstick into Joel, and that's all I'll say.
Joel,
They're fucking deviants.
Get the hell out of there, Joel. Please.
Sherry, who refused to take part in the sessions, said Pixie was the ringleader. They all considered Joel an outsider. He was not a Sexton after all, and he never fought back, so he was an easy target. When the baby Skipper cried for food or attention, Pixie would slap the child's face until he went quiet.
Jesus.
Yeah. The parties also turned sexual, with Pixie sleeping with her brother Willie and Sherry sleeping with her brother Charles. I have no words. One day, Joel staggered over to Dave Sexton's trailer, all bloody and beaten. He had burn marks on his body, and he told Dave, quote, "Don't let them get me." Joel explained that Pixie and them had held him down, whipping him with a belt and an electric cord, then burned him with cigarettes. He had also been hit in the head with a frying pan. While the Sexton boys held him down, Pixie did the beating and burning. Even the kids, Little Dawn and Shasta, had joined in, as well as Dave's granddaughter.
Damn.
Like, they were encouraging the little kids to beat up Joel. Like, hey, I know you're 3, but can you kick him?
Can you hold this hammer?
Dave went to the trailer demanding an answer. Only Pixie admitted to the beating, but didn't tell him they had all been sniffing gasoline all morning long. She said Joel had sodomized her daughters, and that's why they were beating him. Dave told her, quote, "That's something you need to take up with the law." He told her not to take things into her own hands, and especially not on his property. Dave offered to put Joel on a bus back to Ohio, stating, quote, "You don't have to put up with this." But Joel told him that Ed would take care of it when he got back. When Jean arrived home, she learned of the situation with Joel and then learned that her own grandchild had been encouraged to participate in this. She was not having it. She stormed to the trailer and demanded they all get their stuff and leave.
Yeah, I don't blame her.
So when Ed returned from Ohio, he was furious. Ed said, quote, "This boy did nothing to you at all. Keep your hands off him." And he told Pixie, quote, "This is your husband. You're supposed to love and honor him."
So they went too far for Ed.
Too far for Ed. Yet others said that Ed had told them privately that the only reason to stop these beatings, Dylan, was because Joel might run off and tell people, which would draw attention to their family.
And we know that's probably the truer thought of this.
So moving forward, Ed told anyone that beat on Joel, they would have to answer to him. Dave told Ed that when he was gone, the children were very disobedient. Ed had planned to move on anyway and was like, "Well, I get it, but we're going to go." Dave advised his brother to, quote, "Get rid of those kids, grown kids. With the trouble they're causing you, you're going to end up in jail. The time has come for you to let them go on their own." Ed Sexton had no intentions of taking his brother's advice and instead moved the family caravan to Hillsborough River State Park. The Sextons rented Site 89 near a woodsy side of the campground. 14 people were now making their home in a 24-foot vehicle equipped to sleep 8 people. By day, no one left the camper without permission, not even for a trip to the bathroom. The youngest children were not allowed to play outside. At night, they would sometimes build campfires, But if rangers stopped by asking questions, they were told to say that some of the family members were just visiting.
So, gosh.
October in Hillsborough had a record rainfall. So they were stuck. Like, even if they had wanted to be outside the camper, it was pouring rain. So they had to stay inside.
Just all the time raining.
Yes. Oh, and I should also mention, Dylan, that 6 people smoked inside the camper.
Oh.
So can you imagine 14 people stuck in this 24-foot camper, 6 smokers inside the camper, and no one's allowed to leave?
And nobody's got a job, but everybody's smoking cigarettes.
And piled up stinking.
God, I could smell this
Smoking.
camper. I smell it right now.
Pissing and shitting in the camper because they can't go to the bathroom.
God, the air's thick. It's oppressive.
Makes me want to vomit.
It's just a terrible, terrible living
The
situation.
stench, bud.
Just a pure misery.
2 weeks into the Sexton stay at this Hillsborough State Park, the baby Skipper was sick. The child had not been able to hold down solids for weeks. Awake, he was listless or fussy. He had cold sweats. Now, it would be determined later that the infant was teething, but no one in the family seemed to gather that. Also, Pixie and Ed were giving the child adult-sized doses of the NyQuil sleep mix, which later doctors would say was resulting in a gross overdose. So this child was being overdosed like every single day, and that's why he was having cold sweats and fussy
Oh my
and
gosh.
sick and miserable. Pixie would later say she wanted to take Skipper to the hospital, but her father had said no. Charles would later say that the baby was sleeping 17 hours a day, and even he knew that was not normal, and he pulled his sister aside to explain that the baby was going to end up dead. Like, if you keep dosing him with this adult medication, with this liquor and cold medicine combo, and you're giving him like adult-sized doses, you're going to kill this baby. And a baby should not be sleeping that much.
And let's be honest, that concoction wasn't good for anyone. It wasn't,
No.
because you're not supposed to mix alcohol with those types of medications, period, and let alone some kind of concoction mixed all together like that.
Every day.
And you're giving this small child this stuff all the time
Yeah,
to keep it
an
quiet.
infant.
To keep it quiet.
Around 4 a.m. in mid-October, the baby woke up crying and wouldn't stop. Willie woke up and watched his sister Pixie as she gave the baby another dose of the sleep medicine. The child continued crying. The crying lasted about half an hour, and during this time, Ed yelled, quote, to get that baby quiet or he would take care of it. That's when Pixie started slapping the baby around 10 times. Then Pixie Sexton took her hand and held it over the child's mouth until he stopped crying. Pixie put the baby back in the bed, the bunk bed where she was sleeping, put the baby in the bed with her and went back to sleep. Later that morning on October 19th, the others heard Pixie inside the camper screaming. They found baby Skipper lying on Ed and May's bed, dead. Ed said it was crib death. Somebody asked, now what are we going to do? Contacting authorities and arranging a proper funeral was out of the question, Ed said. What's done is done. It wasn't until October 21st that Pixie wrapped the corpse into a blanket, then placed it in a duffel bag. That bag was put into 2 garbage bags. Joel and Willie went into the woods behind the camper with a shovel. About 50 yards in, they stopped. Joel dug a hole. He was crying the whole time and scared, and he kept asking, why me? Why does it have to be my son?
Jeez.
After the child was buried, they returned to the camper. Joel was very upset and kept saying it wasn't right. They should contact authorities and they should hold a proper funeral for the baby. Pixie told Ed she would go to prison for murder if they went to police. Others heard Ed saying that if Joel kept this up, we're going to have to take him out.
This family's so off the tracks. Their thought processes are so messed up. I mean, they don't even miss a beat. It's like nobody else even cares that this little baby died.
It's horrible.
It's just a problem. They're glad because they don't have to hear a cry now. It's just they're not even missing a beat.
The worst people.
And Joel's upset about being forced to
bury his child
and lie about his child's death and bury it. in a very improper fashion. I don't think anyone would be okay with that.
And he's not even allowed to show any emotion that
Yeah.
he's upset
Yeah.
or grieving.
Jeez.
On October 21st, Michelle Croto testified at a grand jury. The next day, Eddie Jr. showed up at Uncle Otis's house with a disturbing story. He contacted law enforcement, and detectives were stunned when they came over. Eddie Jr. admitted that he had been sexually abused by his father, Ed Sexton, multiple times, starting when he was 13 or 14. Eddie Jr. suspected his father had sexually abused the other boys, especially Willie. So after talking to the Sexton children, there were probably dozens, possibly dozens of crimes. I mean, we've got incest, rape, fraud, maybe murder, disappearing bodies. Because remember, Michelle claimed she had seen a body in the trunk in their garage at some point, not knowing who this person or victim might be.
Or what happened or anything.
No. Eddie Jr. also testified before a grand jury on October 25th. Indictments were handed down against Ed and May Sexton. Ed faced 4 counts of rape and 4 counts of sexual imposition. May faced gross sexual imposition and child endangering. So now with this grand jury indicting them, the FBI can get involved. And by the way, I'm a little stuffy today, so if I sound funny, it's my allergies. The names produced an immediate hit in the FBI network. FBI headquarters knew about this couple because Attorney General Janet Reno's office had received a videotape from them.
Oh my gosh.
The Sextons had made follow-up calls repeatedly to the Justice Department asking for a meeting.
Hey, Miss Reno, get my tape yet?
Can we have a meeting with her?
Where's this wondering at what time is the meeting going to be?
We didn't get no. We've got a fax machine. You can fax us.
You can fax me. And if we don't pick up, just use the answering machine.
Yes.
Just leave us a message.
When May called on November 8th, an agent told her about the warrants. She was advised to turn herself in. May only said that she was, quote, down south, and she would check with Ed about whether or not they were willing to surrender.
Yeah, I'll get back to you and let you know whether or not we're going to surrender, okay?
So a memo was sent out warning that Ed Sexton should be considered armed and dangerous with suicidal tendencies because he's already barricaded himself in a house one time with weapons. The FBI, I mean, even though they're like out for him, they don't exactly know what he's capable of.
No, and you got to imagine anybody they come into contact with that has known the Sextons any at all, neighbors, other family, whoever. I'm sure the stories are just one crazy story after another. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah.
Because it has to be.
May would claim that while camping in Hillsborough, Ed had been drugging her. She said he insisted on making her plate, like every night, the dinner plate, and that about 30 minutes after she would eat dinner, she would pass out and not remember anything that was happening.
So he doses her with something.
Yeah.
To make her go to sleep.
He don't want to hear his wife or them damn kids. Yeah. Soon after burying little Skipper, the Sextons moved on to the Little Manatee River State Recreation Area located between Tampa and Sarasota. Joel and Pixie's relationship disintegrated further as they frequently argued about the baby. Ed would take Pixie on walks and counsel her about the marriage. He urged Pixie to make things work, to treat Joel like a husband, and to, quote, have relations with him. He encouraged the couple to hold hands and take walks together and to find privacy, often giving them a blanket for their walks.
Oh. Yeah, he's such a sweet man.
He really knows how to romance a woman.
Yeah.
Even his daughter.
What the hell?
Let your husband romance you the same way I do.
Look, you know them things we do? You should go do that with your husband. Here's an old dirty blanket.
Yeah.
That smells.
Like cigarettes.
Like cigarettes.
Joel's Aunt Teresa was growing increasingly concerned and trying to track him down. I mean, she hasn't heard from him in months. Since he was over 21 and married, the police wouldn't let her file a missing persons report. She would write letters and mail them to the Sexton's P.O. box, but never received an answer. Then something kind of odd happened. on November 30th.
Okay.
We got to talk about this because it's just so fucking crazy. And I cannot imagine what this woman was thinking. A librarian named Gail Novak, who worked at the University of South Florida, spotted a young man walking through the library. She noted that he was barely able to walk or talk. He appeared at the front desk asking questions, but she could barely make out what he was saying. She thought he was drunk or on drugs. Then a young woman with what she described as raccoon eyes came up next to him. The couple, Joel and Pixie, wanted information on sudden infant death syndrome. Pixie asked the woman, quote, "How does a baby's head and arms look when a baby dies of crib death?" Pixie said she wanted to see a picture. Yeah, this librarian's like, what?
Yeah.
Then another young man joined them named Willie. Oh, and by the way, they're just like introducing themselves like, "I'm Joel, this is Pixie, this is my brother Willie.
This is my other brother, Daryl."
Yeah, just to this librarian who's probably like, "I don't care." Joel introduced him and said that he had driven them to the library. Novak showed them the computer where she helped pull some references. The whole time, Pixie's rambling incoherently about how she had had a baby, they were camping, and the baby died. Then they told this librarian, Gail Novak, that the dead baby was in the car.
Oh.
And asked, "Do you want to see the baby?" Novak would later say that Pixie had mentioned a second baby, and she was sure of the date on November 30th because of some information she had listed in her day planner, like things that were happening at the library, and that was the day they had come in. So she's saying they're not talking about the baby Skipper dying, that they're talking about a second baby.
Oh, no.
So she thinks that Pixie was pregnant and delivered a second baby that died, and they had it in the car.
Oh, God.
On this date.
And they're trying to get more information about
Yes.
crib death.
Novak told Joel that she couldn't find more information at this moment because she had other things going on, but that if he wanted to leave his name and number, she could further research and get in touch with him. He told Novak that he was leaving for Ohio, but maybe she could contact Pixie. Joel then told this woman that he had made a reservation on the phone for a plane ticket. Pixie grabbed the librarian's arm and begged her to come to the car to see their dead baby. "I'm very busy," the librarian told her. I mean, there was no way she was leaving the library, not with them, and definitely not to see that.
No.
When Gail Novak tried to call for help, security thought she was playing a prank on them and hung up on her.
What kind of security is this?
Gail offered to call the hospital for Pixie, but she said there was no use because the baby was already dead. Now, about 30 minutes later, Novak noticed this old man had arrived. He demanded to see books about Native Americans and wanted information on local campgrounds.
That's got to be Ed.
Now, while Ed was asking the librarian about the Native American books, Willie approached. She overheard a conversation between the two as Ed said, quote, "The grave is ready for tonight."
God, I bet this librarian's like, what the actual fuck is happening right now?
You know it.
Because this is the most action I've ever seen in the library.
He rambled on something about welfare people believe whatever kids tell them. Again, she's just like, what is happening? I need to go to lunch. I mean, this woman was just like, what the hell? The scene continued in the library with Ed getting physical with both Willie and Pixie. Like, she saw Ed grab both adult children and like throwing them against the shelves and
against the Dewey Decimal System,
the
card
shoving
catalog.
them against the card catalog. And then she overheard an argument between Joel and Ed. Joel said something about his family had sent him $100 for a ticket, and Ed was demanding to know where the money was. As soon as the money was mentioned, Ed marched the three adults out of the library. The official story being told at the campsite was that Joel was picked up by a woman driving a red Nissan, that he had received a letter from his aunt stating that his grandfather was ill and no one had seen Joel since.
So now Joel's missing.
Yes.
And in the library was the last time anybody saw him.
Yes.
My God.
Ed spoke of erasing Eddie Jr. and his brother Otis. After they killed Otis, they would take care of Eddie Jr. and his family. Eddie Jr. had a son in 1993, and Ed discussed taking that child as a replacement for baby Skipper, who had died.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. About 6 weeks after being at this little manatee park, a new camper arrived. The Sextons were now going by the last name Wise. Ed was telling people, by the way, that he was a Native American writer.
Right.
Yeah.
Man, he's really hell-bent on these Native American roots that he does not have.
Yes. So this new camper, his name is Ray Hesser, and he's disabled, so he uses a 3-wheel scooter to get around. But he has a brand new motorhome, a really nice Bronco too, seems to have money, seems to be successful, and Ed devises a plan to get Pixie close to this new camper. Ed hatched a plan to get Pixie close to Ray. Once he fell for Pixie, they could kill Ray and Ed would take over his identity.
That's a really good plan.
Yet Ray Hesser was a smart man and knew much of what Ed Wise told him was basically a bunch of bullshit and lies. Something about the family just didn't sit right with him. When Willie and Ed tried to play matchmaker, Ray was no fool and knew exactly what they were up to. Like, he was not trying to get with Pixie.
Right. He don't want Pixie.
He don't want none of that.
I'm glad he didn't fall for that.
Then out of the blue, detectives received a call from Orville Sexton. That's Ed's older brother who lived in West Virginia. And he was pretty upset about some long-distance charges on his phone bill. These hoes ain't got no loyalty, Dylan. Your brother's going to rat you out because of some long-distance phone calls.
Well, look, that was a big deal back in the day. Because all of a sudden, you get a phone bill, that was $800, $1,000 out of nowhere. And long-distance charges was a big deal. And most people did their talking after 9 p.m. Yeah.
So when Ed had been on one of those runs to Ohio to pick up a check, he had stopped by his brother's house and then made some long-distance phone calls, calls to Florida specifically. And now the older man was on the hook for the charges. So he tells investigators that Ed is holed up at the Little Manatee Park.
So he's dialing them out over the long-distance charges.
Yes. Then on January 14th, Ed told his family, quote, "Today's the day." The patriarch had been discussing for days how they could kill Ray Hesser so Ed could take over his identity, and they were going to make this happen.
So he's just going to put on Ray's clothes and ride the scooter around and just act like he's Ray now?
Well, he's already riding around in a wheelchair half the time, telling people he's got like cancer and muscular dystrophy and
Native American roots.
Yeah, and who knows what else.
He's probably telling people he's got sickle cell. Don't ask me any further questions.
Now, Dylan, I have to comment. You were just doing this little jumpy move in the seat, and you got your little legs up, and you seem jazzed. Are you okay?
I'm sprawled out.
Is Ed Sexton's story making you feel springy?
I'm just trying to get to the end of this one. I'm trying to make it, dude. I'm hanging on here.
I know.
I want them to get this son of a bitch, man. He is a fucking monster. He has totally twisted all these kids. Ruin them,
they
honestly.
They are going to need years of therapy and deprogramming.
Yeah, seriously. I mean,
I don't even know if that's going to work for this family.
No, when you're raised all your life in this type of dysfunction, it really does bad things to you. I mean, it truly does.
Okay, so now this plan has been hatched with Ray.
He's gonna be Ray's doppelganger.
So Sexton is showing his sons how they should tie Ray Hesser up, how to tape his mouth. He's claiming that, once they get this done, he's going to shoot him. So he's got the plan. We just got to get him and tie him down.
Right.
The FBI, who didn't want another Ruby Ridge situation, decided to contact park rangers at this campground and give them a heads up about the Sextons. One of the rangers warned Ray Hesser to stay away from the family. He didn't go into details, but he told him, you need to just trust me on this.
God, maybe Ray needs to pack up and head on somewhere else.
Well, he's thinking about it. We'll get to that. So later that day, Ed and May had driven along with Christopher, Kimberly, and Pixie to Sun City, where they were going to pick up a few items from a Winn-Dixie grocery store. It was January 14th, 1994 at about 1:36 p.m. The family had been on the run for 13 months. When Ed turned off the ignition in the parking lot, the doors suddenly flung open. Men in camouflage clothing shouted, "FBI!" The family was ordered to get face down on the pavement, guns pointed at their heads.
Damn.
Ed and May Sexton were held in the Hillsborough County Jail on fugitive warrants. Child Protective Services took Christopher, Kimberly, and Matthew into custody, and they were eventually flown back to Ohio. Rangers ordered Willie, Pixie, and Charles to leave the campground after the arrests. They left in the big motorhome. It was a big Dodge motorhome. And they took one of the cars, leaving behind a Nissan that they had actually stolen from May's brother.
My God.
Oh, and in this couple of months that they had been gone, they had put like 50,000 miles on this new car that they had stolen.
So
Just driving back and forth from Ohio to Florida.
So they had a literal caravan.
They did.
A motorhome and multiple other vehicles.
Yeah, so they leave behind the stolen car and take off. The only person who was not accounted for was Joel Good and also his infant son, Skipper. Couldn't find Joel or the baby. Eddie Jr. drove to Florida to pick up his brother Charles, Sherry, and her son Christopher. I know there's so many names it's hard to keep track. Willie and Pixie, along with her two children, went to Uncle Dave's house because they wanted to stay in Florida. Mainly so they could be close to their parents in jail.
Oh, okay.
Back in Ohio, Sherry Sexton began disclosing accounts of sexual abuse, which started at age 13. Her son Christopher was born while the abuse was happening, and she had had a second pregnancy, which resulted in miscarriage. She agreed that investigators could perform a blood test on her son.
Now, I've got to say, I'm surprised Uncle Dave will allow them to come stay there on his property, honestly.
I guess since they're just the two adults, maybe?
Yeah, it's only 2 of them, not 22 of them now.
Charles was interviewed about the abuse he had perpetuated against his siblings because Lana and others had claimed Charles had abused them. But he denied it. Soon he began telling what he had done, but he said it was only when his siblings had asked for it.
Okay.
Yeah. And then he recanted his story. I mean, he was just kind of all over the place. Like, during one interview, he would deny ever sexually abusing his siblings. Then he would admit to it in another interview and then deny that it happened. Charles said he didn't know where Joel Good was and that he had left a few weeks before Christmas, heading back to Ohio, and that he had taken the baby with him. Joel's family, of course, had not seen nor heard from him. Despite Ed being in jail, he still urged Willie and Pixie to carry out the plan involving Ray Hesser. During visitation, he asked them, quote, "Do you think you can pull the job off?" Like, you're in jail, bud. You're not going to be able to assume this man's identity. You're in jail. You are locked up. You are probably never, ever, 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 ever leaving that jail cell.
Even if you're not in jail, dude, this plan's not going to work, bro. You can't just kill someone and take over their life. This isn't a freaking bad movie on TV.
This isn't a Lifetime movie.
What are you talking about? I'm going to assume his identity.
Of course, by now, Hesser knows of the trouble. Like, he's heard from the Rangers. He knows that this family has been busted, that they were raided by the FBI, that they're in jail. They've been kicked out of the campground. You know, by this time, the park rangers, I mean, he knows what's going on. Everyone's talking about this campground drama.
Oh, I'm sure.
So he doesn't trust Willie or Pixie, and he is not trying to get involved with them, even when they show up at his campsite unannounced. Now, he assumed they had something planned, especially when Willie kept asking, like, to hang out with him. And that's when Ray told him that he had to go to Camping World. He had an appointment there and had to take his camper to this Camping World. Ray said, "Well, Or, Willie's like, well, we'll go with you. And Ray finally told him, well, why don't you just meet me there?
Yeah.
Like, drive separately, meet me there. Instead, Ray Hester drove in the opposite direction, escaping the two.
So he's leaving.
He's leaving. Charles told investigators in Ohio the truth about Skipper Lee, that Pixie had killed the baby and the child was buried near their former campsite. But there was more. Joel Good had been killed about a month earlier. So this is in January, that he had been killed in December at a different campground. So these authorities in Ohio are just like, what? And this story just keeps getting deeper and deeper and darker. Charles had been ordered to go with Pixie to buy a shovel, he said. On their car ride, she had told him that Willie had killed Joel and they needed to bury him. Sherry Sexton confirmed the story, saying she had been told to watch Dawn and Shasta while everyone else went to bury Joel in the woods.
We got to go bury Joel. We'll be back in a little bit. I mean, what the fuck, dude?
Charles was flown to Florida along with an Ohio detective to meet with Hillsborough County law enforcement so they could attempt locating the bodies of Skipper and Joel Good. It did not take very long for cadaver dogs to catch a scent. About 150 yards or so into the woods, Skipper's grave was finally discovered. Arrest warrants were issued for Pixie and Willie Sexton. Pixie and Willie were actually at the jail visiting their father when they were placed under arrest. Detectives felt like Willie had the mental capacity of an 8-year-old. He seemed to have no idea about the trouble he was in or any kind of consequences. Didn't seem to understand right from wrong. Just answered in short sentences when they would ask him a question. The motorhome was now in Willie's name. Ed had signed it over to him. So he gave consent for authorities to search this motorhome. They ended up finding some pretty disturbing things in there. I mean, not only did they find weapons, but they found lingerie that was gifted to the little girl Kimberly so she could be with her dad.
Jesus.
And yeah, photos, just very disturbing stuff. So police tried to bluff with Willie, and they told him that they'd found Joel's body after he denied knowing anything about the murder. But then finally he said, yeah, I buried Joel. When they said, we found the body. That's all it took.
And they're legally allowed to lie to you like that.
Yep.
It's legal.
Willie explained that he had strangled Joel Good and that it had been Pixie's idea. Willie also said he had seen Pixie slap baby Skipper and give him more doses of the NyQuil mixture before placing her hand over his mouth. It didn't take long for Pixie to admit her husband was dead. Then she confessed to giving the baby NyQuil and that she had suffocated the baby until it stopped crying. Soon the evidence crew unearthed a body near campsite 18 at Little Manatee. A crudely made garrote was still around Joel's neck. He was lying face down in a 3-foot grave. They discovered a chop wound above his right wrist. He had lesions on his body and short vertical puncture wounds on the back of his left hand. So sure enough, 23-year-old Joel Good was dead.
Poor Joel, man. I wish he had gotten away from those people.
During autopsy, traces of alcohol were found in Joel's system, but surprisingly, baby Skipper didn't have any. So they said they had given him this mixture, but there was nothing in his system. The infant's death was ruled suffocation, and Joel's had been strangulation. Willie also told authorities that he'd witnessed Pixie and Ed having sex in the backseat of the car on a trip to Ohio, and that Sherry's son did belong to their dad. Ed had, of course, an entirely different story. Ed said the child had died of SIDS, and that Willie, Pixie, and Joel had taken the child to bury it. He had only known about it after the fact, when they told him, and that Willie had killed Joel unprompted. He had no idea why.
Yeah, I don't know what he's doing. That's crazy.
May maintained that the baby Skipper had been taken to the hospital by Joel and Pixie, but she could not remember the name of the hospital. She said Ed was never bothered by the baby's crying, and that Joel had gone back to Ohio with his Aunt Teresa. Midway through the interview, she finally admitted that Skipper was dead, but said she had not heard the baby crying or anything that night. Dawn and Shasta were removed from Dave Sexton's house and taken into custody by Florida Social Services. They were examined for sexual assault and both showed signs of abuse. And when asked, they claimed Willie and Charles had abused them. And blood was withdrawn to see if Ed was their father. Ed was proven to be the father of his 3 surviving grandchildren.
Damn. So, I mean, I bet these investigators are like, what in the hell is happening here?
You know it.
I mean, this is crazy.
You know it. Joel and Skipper were buried together in a lone coffin at like this double funeral that was held for them in Canton, Ohio. His family believed the baby was the most important thing to Joel, and he truly believed it was his child. There was no reason to perform a blood test to see if baby Skipper belonged to Ed. They just wanted to let it be.
How sad.
Because they said he loved that child no matter who the father was. 5 days after the funeral, Ed and Willie Sexton were indicted in Florida on first-degree murder charges. In February of 1994, Pixie was charged with first-degree murder for killing her son Skipper. However, she was allowed to plead guilty to manslaughter in exchange for testifying against her father. Willie was found incompetent to stand trial. His IQ was about 70, and he was functionally illiterate. So instead, he was sent to a psychiatric treatment center, but eventually he would stand trial. Ed's first trial was for the murder plot against Ray Hesser. He accepted a plea deal and was given 15 years in prison. The next trial was for the murder of Joel Good. Ed was found guilty and sentenced to death on November 2nd of 1994. The librarian, Gail Novak's testimony was actually pretty critical.
I'm sure.
To this case. Because she was the last person to see Joel Good alive.
And also saw Ed manhandling
and
the adult kids.
We've already got the grave dog and just these random statements that at the time she was not sure what was happening.
Right.
Pixie was sentenced to 6 years for manslaughter. Willie pled guilty to second-degree murder and was given 25 years in prison. May was given 2 years in prison for abusing her daughter Lana sexually. In a second trial, she was given a life sentence for over a dozen abuse charges against her children.
Why does the sexual abuse charges why the sentence is always so low? 2 years? Seriously? For you sexually abusing your own children? That should be 25 years to life. That should be death.
Well, she did get a life sentence.
Well, yeah, I know, but I'm just saying.
I know.
It blows my mind.
It doesn't really make sense.
That's how these molesters get in, 20 different chances to abuse victims over and over.
So in 1997, Ed's verdict was overturned and a new trial was ordered, but he was sentenced to death again at the second trial. Ed died in prison in 2010. May died in prison in October of 2017.
Good.
And I tried to follow up with the other family members, but
not a lot of information.
I don't know what's happened to the Sexton children since.
I don't know. Those poor kids to have lived their whole lives under this insane, monstrous man and mother. Their mother was monstrous.
The only thing
well.
I did find is that James Sexton murdered his roommate and was sent to prison.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn. Well, I hope to think that some of them were able to get away from this and to heal in some way and, to try to put their lives back together and move on. But I don't know. I don't even know if you could ever get over this and be normal.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
I know. This has been one hell of a ride. This story is absolutely insane. This is just pure insanity.
Yeah.
And I debated whether we should even talk about it because it's so messed up. But I think it's an important case to discuss. And it does shine light on, these kinds of things happen in families, people you might not expect. And there is such a stigma and taboo around incest, but it happens and there are real victims out there.
It does happen. Yeah, and unfortunately it happens. And when you have a situation like this, these kids had nobody to actually turn to for help. You know, I mean, they were in such a controlling environment and situation that even when they had chances to talk to someone or something, they were scared to do it. You know.
Well, and I think talking about a case like this also lets other people, I guess, it brings awareness and lets other people know that, if you're in a situation where you know a family, or you maybe are a teacher and you meet a student, or your kid has a friend at school that's so odd and isn't allowed to have friends over, or isn't allowed to participate, and is very isolated. I mean, these are red flags. This could be signs that this type of thing is happening in their life.
Sure can be.
And I think we need to be understanding and compassionate about those things. And because there is such a stigma and taboo around this kind of sexual abuse and incest, a lot of people are afraid to get involved. Like, even if they maybe are aware it's going to happen or that's happening, they kind of don't want to speak up about it because it is so taboo. And they just don't want to get involved.
Well, it's almost like...
Because it almost seems like law enforcement and social services even kind of, like, didn't even want to touch this case because it's so messed up, so messy, and just the subject matter. Like, people don't want to talk about this stuff. It's icky.
And it's almost like the victims themselves in situations like this are almost looked down on in a way. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like it's a whole nother category of victim.
Well, I kind of went back and forth with Pixie because I'm like, what you're doing is so vile, and you want to sleep with your dad. Like, that's so weird and like foreign to, I would say, most of us, right? Like 99.9% of us are like, no, that's so unnatural. That goes against everything. But, she's a victim too, and she's been this
right
and brainwashed from such an early age that she doesn't know it's wrong.
No, I mean, she truly is a victim, but it's sometimes the victims become the abusers, and I think she definitely did that in multiple ways.
And Charles, I mean, he was a victim, but he also became a predator and abused his siblings.
These kids were done this way from day one. Their entire lives.
It's really sad. But I'm glad that Ed and May are long gone.
Yeah, I am too. And like I said, I hope some of the kids were able to try to heal a little bit and get away and move on.
Man, Joel and his family were such a victim. We're such victims of this fucked up family.
Poor Joel. It was the worst thing for him to get tied up with somebody like Pixie.
Well, I think it just goes to show how someone like Ed Sexton knows how to prey upon vulnerable people.
Definitely.
And he picks and chooses people that he sees are vulnerable or weak or whatever that are going to be easy to exploit. And Jolga just kind of happened to be in the crosshairs.
Yep, it's true.
So, really sad story.
Terrible, sad story. All the way around. There's no winners here, folks.
One of the most dysfunctional cases we've ever discussed.
Well, thank you for wading into the darkest parts of true crime to bring this story back out into the light for us.
I'm going to go scrub my brain.
Yeah, I'm going to Clorox my soul.
With some Lysol.
Well, I appreciate that, Heather, and I'm glad it's over. The two parts of the Sexton family.
Yes.
And if you made it this far with us, I'm sure you're as flabbergasted as we are. And obviously, we'll move on to a different subject matter next week. But again, thank you, Heather. I'd never heard this insane story anywhere.
Same.
And I think there's a reason. I mean, I agree with you.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't want to touch this story.
It's just a lot.
Yeah, it is.
It's a lot to put. But I think this is this is your talent, is taking this huge story with all this information and moving parts and breaking it down for us. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And until next time,
get jiggy with it. No.
Yeah, and don't incest, okay? It's not okay.
Incest is not best.
It's bad.
Yeah, you'll end up like the
incest is not best. Is that the saying?
Yeah,
okay.
You'll end up like the Holy Roman Emperor. With like a 8-foot chin.
Yeah. All right.
I can't even think of that guy's name.
Well, it's what happens when you do incest.
Yeah, that's what happens.
That whole family had prominent chins, right? And it kept getting more prominent, right?
Until he looked like an alligator.
Yeah.
Pretty
Wow.
much. The
And that-
Habsburgs.
Because
It took me a minute.
that's how genes work, folks.
I got that middle-aged lady brain fog. It like takes me a couple minutes to remember what I was trying to remember.
You want to tell the listeners right quick about we think we saw a new species of creature.
You tell them.
We think we saw a rabbit squirrel. Okay, and I know that sounds funny. We
still can't figure out what this thing was.
It was a squirrel. It had no tail, and its ears were longer than normally on a squirrel, but not quite as long as a rabbit's.
But it jumped and hopped like a rabbit.
It hopped like a rabbit.
Ran like a rabbit.
But it looked like a squirrel in the face.
I don't know what it was.
I'm telling you.
And we were sober.
We were sober. So
The only thing I was hopped up on was like, dinner.
Just know
but we don't know what it was.
that when you're outside in the dark, that there may be this rabbit squirrel creature out there. And hopefully you'll be safe.
And it could maybe eat your soul. I don't know.
I don't know. Or maybe it's cuddly. Maybe it's nice.
Maybe it's terrifying.
I think it's terrifying.
I don't know what it was. I'm still baffled. I'm still very baffled by it.
Oh, all right. Until next time, watch out for the rabbit squirrels and stay away from the Sextons.
Bye.
Bye.